Hello, my name is Billy Wiedemann. For my group's experiment, we investigated the effect of emotional photos on heart rate and pulse rate. In my group was myself, Jess, Aaron, and Ashwin. So the cardiovascular system is modulated by the automatic nervous system, and the cardiovascular system controls blood flow throughout the body as well as the heart rate of the body. Now there are a wide variety of stimulus that affect the cardiovascular system's response. Certain stimulus can cause an increase in the cardiovascular system response, while certain other stimuli can cause a decrease in the response of the cardiovascular system. One specific type of stimuli that's important is emotional stimuli. And emotional stimuli can be anything from an emotional event or emotional photo or anything that really triggers an emotional response in the body, either mentally or physiologically. One way that you could investigate the effect that emotional stimuli has on the body is by examining the change in heart rate during the exposure to an emotional stimuli. So in previous studies by Nakahara et al., they found that emotional arousal due to music, which tends to have an emotional value attached to it, caused an increase in heart rate. They also found that the length of the exposure to the music also caused an increase in the heart rate. So in that situation, you have emotional stimuli changing the heart rate of the subjects. In another study, you had Rees, Patiol et al. They found that photos exhibiting fearful stimuli caused a change in the cardiac response. So both situations, you can see that emotional stimuli has an effect on the cardiac and the cardiovascular system response. So for our experimental design, our group decided that we wanted to look at how emotions and some basic emotions like happy, sad, etc., stuff like more common, affect the cardiovascular system. So we looked at the effect of emotionally loaded photos on the cardiovascular system and heart rate and pulse rate. So we hypothesized that the heart rate would change during exposure to emotional photos. We predicted that heart rate would increase compared to a baseline when exposed to emotionally loaded photos. And we said the type of photo would also cause a variation in heart rate depending on the type of emotion that's associated with the photo. So as our methods, we used LabTutor to monitor the cardiac cycle. We used an ECG, which is electrocardiography, to examine the heart rate of the individuals, as we also used a pulse transducer to examine the pulse rate during the exposure to the photos. We had two subjects, one male, one female. Each subject went through 2 trials for each of for the experiment. And we monitored, in order to get a baseline or the heart rate for each subject, we monitored them for 1 minute, hooked up to an ECG and a pulse rate, while we had them looking at just a blank screen in order to obtain a baseline for them. So as you can see here in this photo, you have the pulse rate on top and you have the ECG. This is the QRS complex on the bottom. So we then exposed, after obtaining a baseline, we exposed each of the subjects to 4 different emotionally loaded photos. So we had a sexy photo, a scary photo, a sad photo, and a happy photo. We exposed each of the subjects to them for 1 minute each. We gave them 10-second breaks in between exposing them to each of the photos. We also exposed them to a neutral photo in order to have that as a control in the experiment. We then took all the pulse rate information and the ECG information, and we took the first 10 seconds of each of the subjects' exposure to the photos, and we converted that into pulse rate and to beats per minute. And we used ANOVA to compare this information to the baseline and to look for significant results. So as you can see here, this is an example of a neutral photo, this is an example of a sexy photo, of a scary photo, the happy photo, and a sad photo. So for the results of the experiment, ANOVA found that they were not statistically significant or different from the resting BPM or heart rate, pulse rate. We did, however, find that the BPM and the pulse rate when viewing a happy photo increased in both of the subjects. So you can see here that it went from approximately 70 beats per minute to 78 beats per minute. The black bar is the female, darker bar is the male subject, and the lighter bar is the female subject. We also found that the BPM and the pulse rate decreased for the male subject when viewing the sad photo. So as you can see here, it dropped to approximately 66 beats per minute, and the pulse rate also dropped to around 66 beats per minute for the male subject. The BPM and the pulse rate for the female subject increased when viewing any type of photo, so that included the neutral photo as well. So the female subject's heart rate increased in all of the trials. Like I mentioned before, we did find that the results were not statistically significant. The standard deviations were also not statistically significant after using ANOVA. We did, however, find that the trends in the data, they do suggest that the heart rate was affected by the photos, the emotional photos. Because as you can see here, happy photos cause an increase in the heart rate in both of the subjects. This could definitely be due to the fact that happiness is a positive emotion, has a positive effect on the cardiovascular system and the physiological responses in the body, which could cause an increase in heart rate. We also found that the sad photo did cause a decrease in the heart rate in the male subject. This could be due to the fact that sad photos or sad emotions tend to have a depressant effect on the body, both mentally and physiologically. And this could definitely decrease the heart rate based on the physiological responses in the body. And like I said before, that the female subject, her heart rate increased in all of the trials, even the neutral one, which you wanted to see that the neutral photo stayed the same as the baseline. So this could be due to extraneous variables that affected her heart rate when taking that information. Now, some of the sources of the error that we observed, because we were in a true laboratory setting where the participants had quiet and were focused only on the design, commotion in the background could have definitely altered their results and their concentration on the experiment, which could have definitely affected the way that we interpreted their heart rate and their pulse rate. Discomfort might have also played a factor. If you look at the pulse rate transducer and the ECG, they're both very sensitive instruments, so any type of movement can affect your readings and cause like an increase in the heart rate or a decrease in the heart rate or the pulse rate when you're looking at that. So when you're sitting at a table for that long of a time, it's hard to keep still sometimes, so any slight movement could have had an effect on the heart rate. And varying emotional responses between the participants could have affected it. You don't really know the participant's background, so previous emotional situations could have had an effect on how they responded to the different emotional stimuli. Our results were similar to what we had seen in previous research. In the previous research by Nakahara et al., they did find that music, which tends to have a wide range of emotions associated with, did cause an increase in heart rate. Ours show that a heart rate increase just wasn't significant. Same thing with the Ruiz-Patiol et al. Study. Their fearful stimuli caused an increase in heart rate. Our fearful stimuli caused an increase in heart rate. Just like I said before, our results weren't significant, so we can't really use that to say for sure what was causing it. But we did see a trend of data that showed that in both subjects, fearful stimuli caused an increase in heart rate. What we concluded from the study was that visual stimuli that generate emotional responses did not affect the heart rate. The trend suggests that it may have been like that, but like I said before, because it's not significant, we can't really interpret that the stimuli caused any change in the heart rate. But one thing we can do maybe next time, or for future experimental designs, is that you can create a situation where you have more subjects. That way, to increase the power of the study, and in doing so, you can maybe obtain significant results. Because, like I said before, we were able to see definitely certain changes in heart rate. It did fluctuate, but until that's significant, you have trouble interpreting the data. Other ways that we can do it, we can change the experimental design is by altering and making a way so that we can survey the participants. That way, we know the effect that certain emotional pictures may have on them. Make sure that we be able to, that way we can eliminate some extraneous and correlating variables that might have an effect on how they respond to a scary photo or a happy photo or a sad photo. And that way we can limit some of the noise and some of the errors that we might get. You want one, like I said before, the commotion in the lab might have definitely caused some distractions for our participants. So changing the lab setting could definitely be better. But it's definitely something that you really want to investigate. Emotions are something that plays a huge role especially in our cognitive abilities, and affect us both emotionally, cognitively, and physically. And it's important to realize that emotions and emotional stimuli can definitely have an effect on the body, by investigating how emotions can, emotional stimuli can have an effect, can definitely lead us to figuring out some different ways to see how the cardiovascular system works, how heart rate is affected by emotion, and even maybe see in health responses. If people are affected negatively by negative emotions, positively by positive emotions, how we can improve healthcare and how we can improve people's emotional lives that translate directly into their cardiovascular health. So thank you.